Hello, my lovely friends of the poker and crypto communities. My name is Todd Wittelis, also known as Dandruff, and I am not a young man. I have been around the poker scene for more than 2 decades. In fact, I've even been around the online poker scene for more than 2 decades. But unfortunately, that put me square in place to get cheated by the Ultimatebet and Absolute Poker super user scandals of the 2000s. I was playing high-stakes poker then. I ran right into these cheaters. I got ripped off for a lot of money, and I was the first one to call it out in 2007 regarding Absolute Poker. And then a separate scandal for Ultimatebet took place in 2008, which turned out had been going on for more than 5 years. In fact, that was a much lengthier scandal than the Absolute Poker one. So these were 2 huge scandals of 2000s poker, and the name you probably remember if you were around in those days or you read about those days would be former World Series of Poker main event champion Russ Hamilton, who won the main event in 1994. But there were other names that were involved. Aside from Russ, the one probably you heard mentioned the most was Greg Pearson, and he eventually went on, ironically, to run cybersecurity firms. In fact, the one he was running became pretty big, called iOvation. But this is not about Greg Pearson. And it's only a little bit about Russ Hamilton. The reason I'm doing this segment so many years after the fact, because it's late 2022, and the tape I'm going to play you is from close to 15 years ago in 2008. The reason I'm playing it is because the main voice you're going to hear on the clips I'm going to play you are from a man named Daniel Friedberg. And Daniel Friedberg was the attorney/executive at UB. He was one of several executives there trying to cover up the scandal when they could no longer hide from it. There was indisputable proof that cheating was taking place over a long period of time on UB, and they were basically trying to figure out what to do and how to get away with paying the least amount of money back to the players. And Travis Makar was the fall guy for the whole thing. It was decided that they were going to blame Travis for it, and he was going to agree to take the blame and try to get themselves out of any culpability. Russ, for whatever reason, recorded this meeting secretly, and then he gave the tapes to Travis, and then later on Travis came forward with these tapes. They never went forward with the actual plan to blame Travis. They went a different direction, and Russ ended up taking the fall for it. But that was the initial plan, to blame Travis, as you're going to hear in the tapes I'm going to play you. The reason this is relevant now is because Daniel Friedberg was the general counsel of FTX, which is a major cryptocurrency exchange that went belly up basically this week and wiped out a lot of people's life savings. It was really, really ugly. It did not affect me personally, unlike the Ultimatebet scandal, which did affect me personally. But the FTX thing did not affect me personally. But a lot of people, including a lot of people in poker, lost a lot of money because of what happened at FTX. And FTX had Daniel Friedberg on the payroll since March of 2020, and he was their chief compliance officer, which is laughable given his history with UB. So I'm going to play you a clip from this Travis Makar tape of this meeting between Russ Hamilton, Daniel Friedberg, and 2 other people. But in this tape I'm going to play, in this portion of the tape, because it's a 3-hour tape and a lot of it is hard to hear and a lot of it is not relevant to Friedberg. So I'm going to play the most interesting and important clips from this tape, and you're going to hear Friedberg mainly talking. It's going to be Friedberg and Russ Hamilton talking, and I'll stop it every so often to explain what is going on. So let's take a listen.
The book from the server that allows this discovered the server mistake. Right. They've also discovered which account takes advantage of the mistake, and they have times now when this account logged in.
So that's Daniel. That's Daniel's voice. You're going to hear a lot of him. Daniel Friedberg is discussing with Russ Hamilton the plan on how to blame this on Travis Makar publicly, so this way none of them have to take the fall for what happened there.
So for us to come out and say the ideal, we've looked at this account, there's no cheating. It's going to be tough to sell. Now, on the other hand, I think what we can do is to say, we've studied it. We know that sometimes it was used, sometimes it was not. These limited times are the times it was used. These people are being refunded. And whatever the story is in the end, reports from somebody like McAvoy are going to have to back the story.
Did you hear that? So Daniel Friedberg was not talking about coming clean and coming forward with the cheating that was really happening. He was coming up with a story to tell the public about the accounts and already discussing how to only pay back some of the people who were cheated by saying that the accounts that were cheating were doing it only some of the time and not all the time. Let's go on.
So, we're going to have to say in there, after we determine...
What's the explanation for the person asking the question? And you must have asked the question yourself. For a third party to have had access to this tool.
I don't think we can, in the end, I don't think we can say that it was a third party. Say that there was a consultant that had knowledge of the code. And he hacked into the system. You're an expert. Hacked into the system, took advantage of this. And say that, similar to the last one.
Here's what I told you.
So that was Russ starting to talk. So some other guy in the background, I'm forgetting who it was, but there was a third person who was asking how they could explain it. And he was saying here that they're going to try to claim that a consultant basically hacked into the system and utilized this feature to look at people's hole cards. And the consultant was going to be Travis McCarr. That's who they were going to blame it on. So this is Friedberg coming up with just a complete nonsense story, a complete fabricated story about what happened. They're not just spinning it a little bit. They are completely changing what occurred to tell the public. This is his suggestion, which they ended up not going with only because so much was discovered and so many cheating accounts were discovered that they couldn't just blame it on one guy using one account. See, when they had this meeting, it was earlier on in the whole process. So not as much had come out yet, and they thought they might be able to engage in some damage control. But once too much was known, then they had to go a different direction. But listen to Friedberg there. The guy is actually trying to invent stories to lie to the poker public, and you'll hear why he's doing that shortly.
That's what I told Greg this morning. Travis, do you know Travis, my guy? Travis is willing to say that he did all this for me.
He hacked it. So
he actually is the one that fixed it. It was broken.
So that's Russ Hamilton, and he's saying that Travis was willing to take the fall, that he had just talked to Travis, who is willing to take the fall for this, and that he told him and Greg, referring to Greg Pearson, that he would do this. And then Russ is saying, look, we're not even completely lying because Travis is the one who fixed the tool. I guess the tool which allowed them to see the hole cards broke at some point. I don't know how it broke, but it was having issues working properly, and Travis fixed it, according to Russ. So he said, hey, look, he fixed it, so in a way, it was his tool, which is not really true. Travis did not write the tool. Travis did not have anything to do with the development of the tool. It is possible that maybe he fixed it on Russ's end so Russ could use it when maybe it stopped working for whatever reason, but I assume that was the extent of Travis's involvement in making the tool work. It was never fully understood what Travis's full role was here. It's possible he was nowhere near innocent and was very aware that he was, at the very least, assisting with cheating, but that's not really important here. That's very old stuff that we don't have to rehash. I'm, again, playing this so we can hear Daniel Friedberg's role in this whole thing, given the recent news about FTX and the devastation it's caused.
He actually is the one that, and he's willing to say that he even went as far as to call up Freddie Deeb and say, Russ wants you to cash this, because he was like, everybody knows he does everything for me. He does my airline tickets, my schedules, he does everything. So if he was to call Freddie and say, Freddie, Russ wants to send you some money to cash, or Bonnie, he wants to send you some. So he's willing to say that he did this himself.
Just in case you're wondering who he's referring to, Freddie Deeb is one who's always been under suspicion but it's never been totally clear whether Freddie Deeb was just kind of like a useful idiot that they were cashing out money through, and he was just doing it as a favor and didn't know that he was cashing out cheating money, or if he knew what was going on. That's never been totally clear. I've suspected that Freddie knew what was going on, but again, that's not really the point here. And the Bonnie he's referring to is Bonnie Lanehouse. She's a longtime figure in poker, friend of Russ Hamilton, and she was involved in this whole scandal as well on the back end. And she briefly got a job at the Westgate, which I think was called the LVH at the time, but the former Las Vegas Hilton. She got a brief job a while after the scandal managing the poker room, and actually they were convinced to fire her after they learned about her past involving UB. So good for them to fire her. But that's who they were talking about. Let's go on here.
So the only person that he might have to say it to is the KGC.
He would.
He wouldn't want to say that's the one.
No, you don't want to say that to her because they would know who Travis is, a lot of people.
Right. So no, what this is just, that's the explanation for the KGC in Norton.
Okay, let me stop again right here. So that's Daniel Friedberg talking again, and the KGC he's talking about was the Kawanaki Gaming Commission, which was the pretty weak regulatory body that was regulating UB. They were based in one of these First Nation areas of Canada, and I guess they were investigating this, and Norton was referring to Joe Norton, who was the chief of the Kawanakis and also the head of Toquero Enterprises, which was the new owner, at least on paper, of UB at the time. And they were saying, okay, we're going to lie to the KGC, we're going to lie to Joe Norton, but everybody else we're not going to pass the story off about Travis McCarr because they're not going to believe it. And then Friedman goes on to mention that they're going to tell the public even less.
I think for the public, it just has to be former consultant to the company, took advantage of a server flaw by hacking into the client, been able to identify exactly when. Sometimes he played with it, sometimes he played without it.
So there he's even crafting what to tell the public, which is even less than the KGC. The KGC, they were going to identify McCarr, and to the public they were going to tell a reduced version of the story that a former consultant, without naming him, was hacking in and using this tool to cheat people sometimes, but not always. And the reason sometimes is this way, they're admitting it happened, but they're limiting how much they claim it happened, so they have to give fewer refunds.
Sometimes he intentionally won, and sometimes he intentionally lost. Very erratic play. But we've been able to identify the times when the tool was up and their net wins. And that's what
and what you could also say is that the tool was originally set for a 15-minute delay,
and he hacked
it to a real time.
I think that's what we do.
It was originally, because Annie Duke used it on a 15-minute delay quite a few times.
But in the end, though, there'd be a refund. So what we were asking you in this exercise is not to say that you're going to pay these people, but to identify the people that you know well enough that you can explain it away to them, if they were ever to assert a claim against us.
Okay.
Like if they were ever to send an email.
I understand.
And what you would say is, when I say talk to us, it wouldn't be that you're involved. It's just that, I founded this thing with Craig. This is what happened. Friends to the company we're not getting, I didn't take any money back, even though I was owed money. And, that's part of the story, is that I think, Russ, you have to be owed something here.
So he's already crafting a story for Russ Hamilton. Remember, the one who was the ringleader of this whole thing. He's crafting a story after the fact. Daniel Friedberg's crafting a story after the fact for Russ Hamilton to tell people who approach him and ask about this, so Russ can sound innocent. In fact, Russ can sound like a victim too, that he's owed money, but he's not even going to collect it. Like, he got cheated too, but he's not going to even ask for the money back. And this can make them feel better about losing money as well. That if Russ, one of the owners there, is not trying to get money back, then maybe they should feel better about not getting paid either.
Because, you played at these high-stakes tables. So, this thing has to have ripped you off, too. It has to have. So, otherwise it's not going to fly.
Otherwise it's not going to fly. So, basically, Russ, you played at the high stakes. People know that. There's no way you could have not been cheated, and we can't say we refunded you and not them, or it wouldn't make sense. So you've got to act like you're pissed off that you got cheated, even though, in reality, you were the one cheating. You've got to pretend you were a victim.
And we can pick off the story for each person.
How do you think this money, if it's suppose it's a $5 million, which Greg thinks it could be right around $5 million, if you had to pay the players and give KGC.
If we can get it down to 5, I'd be happy. And then
how does the money get paid?
We'll convince the business to pay some straight off the top, just because of that's
ex-CAPSA or AP are you talking?
I'm talking about the business that's running the company right now, Norton's business.
AP or EUP? I'm confused.
Well, it's combined. Yeah.
So Russ doesn't completely understand the structure of the company for whatever reason, but Daniel does very much. He was probably very closely involved in getting that all set up. So I guess Joe Norton's company was involved in running it at the time, and so he's saying that they have to pay. And also ex-CAPSA, which was the original owner of UB, they were a publicly traded company in London, and they sold UB in order to avoid any kind of legal ramifications, since they were publicly traded and they were offering games to Americans after 2006, which was illegal. So that's why it was sold. That's why Joe Norton got involved. So Friedberg's saying, hey, even though ex-CAPSA had nothing to do with the cheating, and even though Joe Norton had nothing to do with the cheating, we're going to get them to pay. We're not going to be the ones paying, even though we're the ones who were involved in the actual cheating. What a great guy.
It's combined, okay?
Right, the operators, the new enterprise.
I don't think they're responsible for anything.
They're not. But nonetheless, we're going to...
This is a damage mitigation.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're responsible for it.
I agree.
See, even Russ here is admitting that they are not responsible, these other people. Ex-CAPSA, Joe Norton. But we have scumbag Daniel Friedberg saying here that he's going to get them to pay anyway for damage mitigation to prevent the company from getting damaged further by this story. And even Russ is like, well, wait a minute, they're not responsible. So even Russ has more of a conscience here than Friedberg does.
So I don't think they're responsible for it.
Well, they're not morally responsible. However, they did buy this business. When they bought it, you always take a risk when you buy a business. Plus, they've made money.
Here's what I feel.
They've made money off the combined business for a year.
They have.
They can pay some of it just straight up.
They can pay some, but here's what I feel. I feel, and I did take this money, and I'm not trying to make it right, Dan. So we got to get that out of the way real quick, okay?
That always got me there. Russ says, I did take this money, referring to cheating, and I'm not trying to make it right. So I guess he doesn't have much of a conscience, which we already knew, but that was pretty powerful to hear from Russ. But let's go on.
I did use a lot for stuff that you don't realize on here for the company that was paid for. I mean, Crazy Canuck, up until he quit working 4 months ago, you can go look at his account. I staked him on every tournament to wear Ultimatebet gear. I mean, he played all over the country for you guys. I didn't have him out there playing for me.
Right.
I mean, even Will called me up 4 months ago. He says, Russ, you quit staking Crazy Canuck. He goes, do you think we should still sponsor him? And I thought, if he's not going to play tournaments, I said, no, I wouldn't hire him anymore. But I had him out there wearing your stuff. When Freddie Deeb, up until the time that
I know.
Yeah, I understand. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of guys that I gave money to that it shows me winning. That I actually would send them $100,000 and say, I'm going to stake you. Not caring if they won or lost, just to get them to play in the big games.
Right.
So I would send a guy $100,000 or $50,000. I said 100. I'd send 25 or 20 or 10 or this to a lot of people. So a lot of these numbers is not all numbers that came out cash. Maybe cash, I don't know. Maybe $7 million. I don't know. You'd have to tell me that. I don't know.
So Russ was saying that maybe it's $7 million that he actually didn't keep for himself, that he actually sent out to other people who were on the site just to get them playing high stakes, to get the high stakes going, to stake them in tournaments wearing UB gear. So he's trying to say, look, I didn't really keep as much as you think I did. I did a lot of this for the company, and I sent out a lot of this money on the company's behalf. By the way, a little aside, that was actually somewhat true, and a little aside regarding doing things for the company's behalf, when they were not getting enough people for their Aruba tournament, and they were concerned they may have to cancel it, Russ said, don't worry, I'll get you players. And then what he did was he would go on these satellites. They just kept running all these satellites for the Aruba tournaments, and he would just go on there with his super user accounts and just keep winning satellite after satellite after satellite and staking his friends and other people he knew or frequent players on the site. So that was how they got a lot of the players that year when they were having trouble getting people interested in that Aruba tournament, was just by Russ winning satellites using the super user tool and handing those seats out. So he was trying to build up the company with the cheating money. That doesn't make it right. I'm just saying that he isn't lying when he says this, but he's saying this for a self-serving reason, Russ. He's saying that he didn't get as much as they think he did, and basically trying to lay out the framework of why he shouldn't have to pay it back. And Daniel's not arguing. Daniel's like, yeah, I know, Russ. I know.
But Bonnie didn't get as much as Greg said here, cash. Freddie Deeb got the most cash.
Also, that Freddie and Bonnie together were like 5 to 6.
Yeah, that's what I say. That's what I said. Bonnie Freddie got the majority of it.
I don't know who got it all.
Yeah, Freddie Deeb. Freddie Deeb got the majority.
Now, Paul is convinced that Carolyn is involved. Heresy.
She's not. And
only because the entries on all these things.
I know.
So.
And here's the thing with Travis.
Okay, before they talk about Carolyn, let me explain who these people are. Paul Leggett was the person who took over, but I think he was more of a figurehead, but he was the guy who took over UB post-cheating scandal, kind of trying to make the thing look legit again. And then Carolyn was Carolyn Heick, Heiack, and she was a longtime friend of Russ, and she was involved in the back end, and she was the one helping Russ get the account names changed so it looked like people were playing against a bunch of different cheaters, because there were tons of cheating accounts, but a lot of these were just the same account with different names, to where anyone playing couldn't tell the difference, that it was not a new account. To them it would look like a new account. And this would be so people wouldn't suspect as easily what was going on, that it wasn't one person always crushing. So Carolyn was the one changing the account names, and according to Russ, as you'll hear, that Travis would call up on his behalf and ask Carolyn to change the account names, and she would. But Russ is trying to say here that Carolyn wasn't actually involved in the cheating, that she was just basically doing what she was asked to do and wasn't really told what was happening.
Travis would call Carolyn. Travis would call Carolyn and say, Russ wants you to change your name.
Right.
And Carolyn
would say that Paul thinks that Carolyn was involved.
Really? Why?
Let me say why. Because that shows that Scaps is responsible. Because Carolyn worked for Jim. Carolyn was one of Jim's DTs.
You guys like the cell phone rings of the 2000s? You missed that? You missed those ringtones in the 2000s? It's pretty obnoxious. Oh my gosh.
It's a good. Hey, Jimmy. I'm in a meeting. Anything important?
Liability is the place where the money is. And, Jim's going to assert.
Tell me. Tell me.
That's all this stuff. Only way to get above that is to say it's fraud. This shows that perhaps the fraud was you.
Great. I love that.
So it's not a fraud thing.
Thanks, Johnny. Right.
So I guess
say that again. I'm sorry. I was Miami. There's another one, Miami John. I had him where you think you're right here. This guy. Like, so it's.
No, I know.
And Andy and Phil, you've got to understand. You paid some of it. You paid some yourself. You got in trouble, I think, for it. They yelled at you. Greg called me at first and yelled at me. But I spent like $100 to put him on that golf thing on TV with the UB stuff. I didn't have him wear UB t-shirt. He wore UB. So I spent a lot of this money there on things for people out there. I did take them. Okay, I'm just trying to...
Russ, I know you.
Okay.
I mean, you helped a lot of people who needed the money with this. And, frankly, I think if you go back far enough, suspicions as to what was sanctioned, what wasn't, is when the company was in real bad shape.
We won't go back
somehow.
So we won't.
But anyway, no, the reason that it's not bad for Carolyn is because it's not bad for this whole, in the big picture, for Carolyn's name to be brought out there, because it shows that Scaps is responsible.
See, look at the scheming that's going on here by Daniel Friedberg. Doesn't this guy just seem like a total snake to you? So he's saying here that even though Russ himself is saying that Carolyn wasn't involved, that Paul Leggett seems to think she was because of all the account names being changed. And even though Russ is saying, no, Travis is just asking her to do it, and she was just doing it and not asking questions, he's saying, no, we need to say she was involved because this way we can get ex-capsa to pay a lot of this cheating money back, and we don't have to. So as long as we make ex-capsa think that one of their people was involved, I bet they'll pay. So it's a good thing that she's suspected. That's what he's telling Russ. Just throwing Carolyn under the bus.
She was a VP there. In order to get to ex-capsa's money legally, they almost have to show fraud because they've gone through this clean bar process to pick all these up.
We're looking at two aspects of it. First off, back for the audit monster not being disclosed to the buyer.
Right. Well, yeah, that as well. And then
But Jim Ryan knew it was there. Didn't know what it had to be used for, but he knew it was there.
And he hid that from Uri. Jay obviously was told not to tell Uri about this. Jason went through the entire code base with Uri. Said the place where it was in the code was in an unusual place. Anyway, but so to shift responsibility to ex-capsa, which is my sort of goal, that unfortunately they're the only people who have the money benefiting from this. I mean, the reason that Russ, if this was used to support the props and...
Okay, so let's discuss what we just heard here. The Audit Monster, which was the name of the tool, Audit Monster 1 and 2. And so basically, Friedberg's trying to say, well, we can get ex-capsa to pay because it was never disclosed that this tool existed. So we can blame it on them that this tool existed and that somebody exploited it, even though that somebody was Russ and probably Greg Pearson too, that we can blame them for having this tool in the first place. Because supposedly this tool was created at the very beginning not to cheat, but for testing purposes, and then it was just never taken out, and then the idea was hatched, and there's various theories as to why the idea was hatched, but the idea was hatched to use it to cheat, and then it was used to cheat for 5 years until it was caught. It probably would have kept going for many more years if it was not caught. So they're trying to come up with ways to make ex-capsa pay back, blaming it on this Carolyn woman and blaming it on the fact that this tool was there in the first place and wasn't properly disclosed when the sale from ex-capsa was made, which is laughable because there's Russ right there who actually used it and cheated everyone and admits it. So that's a little sample for you of Daniel Friedberg and what a snake he was, and I'm sure still is, and it's not surprising that he was the compliance officer for one of the worst crypto companies that there has been as far as damage to the crypto scene. There's only been a few that have been really, really impactful to the crypto world when they have done shady things and gone down, and FTX is definitely one of them, and definitely the most impactful problem company of this year. So anyway, just wanted you guys to hear that. And if you'd like to hear more of this type of content, I do it every week on pokerfraudalert.com. It is an audio podcast and live internet radio program. So I record it live. You can listen live. You can listen in the archives. And we have our show on every major podcast platform you can think of. Not on YouTube, though. This clip's on YouTube. But don't search for it on YouTube because you're not going to find the regular show there. But we broadcast pretty much everywhere else, including live on pokerfraudalert.com and later on your favorite podcast apps. And the show is very long. The show tends to go usually between 5 and 8 hours every week. And we also have a free roll, a cash free roll, where we give away cash money every single week on pokerfraudalert.com. It is a not-for-profit site. I don't have any advertisements there. I don't have any sponsors. I'm really just running it for the community. And it's been up for now almost 11 years. So I hope you enjoyed my trip down memory lane with Daniel Friedberg and Russ Hamilton. Check out Poker Fraud Alert Radio if you'd like to hear more.